Ja, herzlich willkommen. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem dritten Vortrag im Rahmen der Reihe im Transformation tropischer Regenwälder. Well, and today is actually the lecture in English, as you may have noticed, and so I'm also doing my introductory to our speaker of today in English, and this is Professor Daniel Murdiyarso, and he traveled to Göttingen on Tuesday from Bogor in Indonesia, so quite a task, so we appreciate that very much. Daniel is actually professor at IPB Bogor, but he also is a principal scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research. This is actually CFOR. CFOR is a non-profit scientific organization engaging into research on kind of pressing challenges in forest and landscape management all across the world. Well, at IPB, he's professor at the Department of Geophysics and Meteorology. A few words to his career. Daniel studied at IPB Bogor, studied forestry. But then you did your PhD actually in the UK, University of Reading, studying more meteorological things, so this was the Department of Meteorology of the University of Reading. You served as kind of lead author and reviewer on a number of panels. Most importantly, I would guess to mention, is the IPPC panel and IPPC reports. Kind of everyone knows, I think, IPPC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I mean, this is in the press kind of regularly. So you served as I mentioned, reviewer, but also author there. Well, also important, in 2000 you served the government of Indonesia as Deputy Minister of Environment for 2 years. And since 2002, you're a member of the Indonesian Academy of Sciences and chairing the Basic Science Commission, and also to mention certainly is since you were elected as president of the Academy. So this is certainly an eminent person, and we are very much appreciating that you kind of took a bit the burden to travel to Göttingen, and hope you enjoy also the stay. We were talking about that, and of course, we are very much looking forward to your talk. The title probably attracted quite a few of you, so we are curious to hear your perspectives.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for the introduction and for having me here again, because I think this is my third time to visit Göttingen. The first one was back in late 90s. Can you imagine that? Some of you might have not been born yet. When the storm was started in 1994, something like that. Then I came back in 2012. When the CRC was about to start. I'm back here again when CRC is about to be concluded, but hopefully will be expanded too. So it's my pleasure to be here and sharing with you about what we've been discussing for many years. We've been involved in many occasions to analyze what is the role of oil palm in many different perspectives. And I hope the topic that I offer here is not too provoking. If you like chocolate, so you might taste differently after this session, I don't know. But I hope chocolate still remain the same. So the idea of proposing this title really is because this is a public lecture, so I was trying to put everything in a more lay people language rather than scientific one. So let's see the rest of the world from here in Chile, Göttingen, and looking also out to Indonesia, for example, or especially in Indonesia, but also other places which are struggling now to find out ways of doing things sustainably. So when I was thinking about this conversation, the central issue of the conversation will be development, but without any consequences, because development to some extent also expected to improve life quality, but in some cases, they create problems too. And problem can be tense, and it's not only within the country where development is being implemented, but also across the country. So this kind of tension we found quite tense these days with regard to the exportation or importation of oil palm and other agricultural products, especially to Europe. So we will see later what's going on now and how parties or people or countries trying to find a way of doing things better. So I put up here a picture of small holder plantation. You look at the haze behind it, and very irregular planting of oil palm. It's indicating that people are planting in different timing, but also in many cases also different type of planting material. So you can see patches of things. It's not like large-scale plantation. So you can see irregularity, which indicates this is smallholder plantation. Another issue that I would like to bring up here is about the implication of this development, especially on climate change, because in many cases, conversion of tropical forests, which is not done sustainably, will cause a lot of problem, not only in terms of emission, but also in biodiversity sustainability. So people trying to weigh now between the importance of putting up biodiversity or climate change. Climate change is has a very high stakes in many occasions, especially when politicians are trying to negotiate. It's going to happen this year in Dubai, in place where oil is produced, so it will be quite controversial. Some people trying to boycott the COP28 because it is run in Dubai. But we will see how controversial the event will be. Like what we are having now with oil palm is quite controversial in many cases. This is one of the plants which is expected so much for the development purposes, but also hate so much for the environmental issues. So it's quite controversial when we are talking about oil palm in many different society or community. Depending on their interests, it can be hate and love kind of relationship when you are talking about oil palm. So let's see in a more balanced way. That's what I'm going to offer to you tonight by looking at not only from the demand, not only from the supply, but also from the demand side, which is quite big and quite problematic in terms of meeting that demand. The world is so hungry. We don't drink oil palm, of course, or palm oil, but this is part of the food which quite versatile, quite decent in terms of producing, but also in terms of marketing. In many cases, the production can cause a lot of problem if it is not done properly. from the perspective of climate change as well as from the biodiversity. So the thing which is being played out in the global market or global platform is very much political economy issues. So we can contribute on the science there, but certainly the political economy is very complicated, and in many cases it is driven by particular objective or particular interest, and depending on how they negotiate things, then the direction of the political economy will be dictated by the very small community, especially those who are in the lobbies of markets, of legislation and things like that. So what we can say in scientific realm, we will see that as well. Okay, so this is the situation in Indonesia. Oil palm occupy about 17 million hectares. That's half of Germany size. So you can imagine from Göttingen to, I don't know, going to the south, Munich, and perhaps Göttingen is somewhere in the middle, oil palm, planted oil palm. Huge area covered by oil palm in island of Sumatra, Kalimantan, and Papua. So big islands got a lot of this plantation, homogeneous, monospecies, but it is also the source of income, or a lot of people depending on oil palm, about 17, the same number here, 17 million more or less people are dependent on oil palm activities. The CPO, the crude palm oil production, is about 46 million tons, and 60% of them are exported. So the domestic use of oil palm is relatively small, and it's getting smaller and smaller depending on the market price. So business people try to adjust the exportation and things like that depending on the price. And in many cases, the price is very much, as I said earlier, depending on the political economy of the product itself. And in those amounts, 60% are produced by private sector. So when I saw the first picture from smallholder, they are not the majority of production, but very much affected when the price outside is changed or drop, for example. The most vulnerable group of people or producer are the smallholders. And this is the latest figure that I have the other day about the revenue coming out from oil palm export is about 30 billion US dollar. So the size of the economy of oil palm is really staggering, especially for Indonesia, and another exporting country is Malaysia. So 30 billion, that's quite something. If you're talking about the amount of the developed country pledge to cope with the changing climate is 100 billion for G20 or developed countries. 30 billion is produced from oil palm. Just to give you idea how big is the size of the economy of oil palm. So with those stories, is it really bad having oil palm or expanding oil palm plantation? How can we justify and look at that in more balanced manner? Certainly oil palm is the most productive vegetable oil. In terms of production, it is 5 times more production in the same unit area, land area. But compared with the other vegetable oil, it's only used 1/4 of the size for each ton of the products. So if you multiply that, it's 20 times in one particular year, in one particular area that you can produce the vegetable oil from oil palm, compare with, for example, rapeseed. The demand for that is staggering. In early 2000, it was only 11 million. It's 7 times higher before the COVID. It's 71 million ton demand of palm oil. So with that kind of production and efficiency in producing palm oil, it is really staggering compared with the other vegetable oil like rapeseed, for example. Other palm producing oil, crop producing oil is even less than rapeseed. So the productivity of oil palm really is quite versatile and really going to be more and more demand on that. The problem here is the sustainability. So meeting the demand of the market should not always be met by expanding. And the way it is expanded is quite dangerous when you are using fire, for example, as I showed earlier. So more sustainable way of producing oil palm or palm oil is really the challenge for oil producer. So if you look at the nutrition fact of palm oil, there are a number of things which is better compared with other produced products. For example, the fact about the fat itself. There was quite a controversy some 10 years ago about the effect of using palm oil for cooking, but that story has been settled down with regard to the so-called saturated fat. Palm oil was found to be stable, so it's got a high content of saturated fat, which is not trans fat and healthy. So that's the finding of FDA. And also the percentage of vitamin A. This is the only vegetable oil containing vitamin E, which is very useful as antioxidant agent when you consume it. That's related to the establishment of antibody in your body. So vitamin E in oil palm is the only vegetable oil containing vitamin E. So try to relate with the topic that we are talking about here, why we consume this, why we use this. Every day, all the product that we are using, starting from when you wake up until before you go to sleep, is associated with palm oil. You like it or not. Because it is so easy to use and to produce, and in a particular product, they can be used to, well, chocolate is smoothen up the texture with palm oil, and they can also help to stabilize the product, and other foods will benefit from this kind of characteristic too. And the trans fat, as I mentioned earlier, is very, very low. It is harmless. So with that kind of feature and the reality about the low price, make the palm oil a very versatile product across the globe. So how this thing can be hated today in some places, in some campaign, in some effort trying to reduce the popularity of palm oil. I'm not campaigning that this is good, let's do this and that. This is not my role to say that, but this is the fact that we would like to share, and we should know about that and what is the bad side or the bad situation when we are producing this. That's also another important thing. And so far, the importation of palm oil or CPO before this process is quite big in Europe. Until before COVID, it is consumed by about 50% in Europe, 50% used for bioenergy, and the rest are for food and other uses like cosmetic, etc. But the majority is still for biodiesel until 2015. And that importation worth 60 billion euro, more than that. So when countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and other places producing palm oil, these are the demand side situation. And when you're talking about the production with that kind of yield, it's really matching. But the issue here is that everything is not that good when you are producing it, which is not seen by many people, especially when operation is done in a very unplanned, undesigned, ill-designed manner. So that's why early in June, the European Union launched a regulation called EUDR, European Union Deforestation-Free Regulation, for all products, not necessarily from the tropics, but also from European countries, to meet this requirement, regulation to reduce deforestation, with a particular objective to cope with the changing climate and also biodiversity loss. That is stated in the regulation in the EU directives. The problem here is that if you use the term deforestation, then you have to find out or to make sure you know what forest is. I pause there. So you can think that forest is something which is very thick and dense, woody species. No, deforestation or forest adopted definition here is based on FAO definition. So if you have canopy of more than 10%, of trees covering half a hectare, that is considered as forest. So the regulation adopts that definition, so it will be certainly very problematic. When you are talking about planting cocoa or coffee or any product in places where vegetation still remain there, but removed because you need some clearing, some sunlight, and in agroforestry system, that will be considered as deforestation. And that will not satisfy this regulation, and that will not reach the market. So I think there will be a big challenge with this EUDR. But when you read the document there, it is a living document. So I have the impression that there might be some negotiation, some debate about how we define forests and deforestation as well. And it's been long debated in the UN Climate Change Convention about this particular definition when we are talking about carbon, when we are talking about biodiversity. So biodiversity is not orangutan. That's very charismatic and iconic species to remind us that this is very important to keep biodiversity intact. But more than that, I think there are many species which are endangered. I think CRC work in Sumatra has been demonstrating that, how important it is to keep the biodiversity or even microflora and microfauna in the soil, which is affected when you burn the forest. So it's good to have orangutan, but that's not everything. Okay, just to remind us about the importance of biodiversity at large, but also the habitat itself. Again, the problem here is not what we call land sector emission. If the regulation is trying to address climate change, they will miss the train. They will miss the target because the majority of the source of emission is from energy. This is a global figure released 2 years ago. That's still 70% is fossil-based emission. So addressing deforestation to reduce emission of greenhouse gases is only buying the time. One cannot expect the sink to be the solution of the emission. It should be the source, which is fossil. So in Bonn, this is the headquarters of the UNFCCC, been discussed many, many times. The COP will be the 28th this year. We started off in Bonn back in 1993, COP1. And the issue is still going round and around that kind of circle where people or negotiators trying to buy the time that the energy, fossil-based energy generation has not been resolved quite substantially. And early in June, the Executive Secretary of the UN, Mr. Antonio Guterres, was with a very angry face expressing his disappointment about the promise that has not been met in terms of reducing the emission. He addressed that, well, scientific community said that this is unequivocal, but this is not acceptable by the general public. So the world is no longer warming, but it is boiling. And the temperature in the last week of July was the highest in the record. It was more than 16 degrees in the boreal summer, which is quite staggering compared with the 30 years record. It was the hottest summer this year. Very angry face, but the statement there is, how can developed countries show the leadership instead of waiting somebody else to lead? Especially he was addressing G20 countries with better wealth in terms of trying to cope with the emission, but also help with the adaptation. Because climate change mitigation and adaptation is like a coin with two faces. If you solve one side, it's not, completely solving the problem. The other side is equally important. And many countries has very little or very low capacity to adapt with the changing climate. And that's everybody's burden too. So where we are now in terms of reducing emission, if you look at, this is German-based institution called CAT, Climate Action Tracker. They track all the promise of the countries and put up in a graph like this, very nice, that the the Paris Agreement will have to achieve emission which will not cause increase of temperature beyond 1.5 degree in 2030. And by that target, everybody will have to reduce the emission, which is the current level is 55 billion ton. It has to be halved in 2030. But so far, this is far beyond the expectation. Last year, the temperature already increased by 1.1, almost 1.2 degree, and it's only 8 years left. So people are worried about achieving this target. We call it Paris target. And perhaps the secondary level of target 2 degrees might be achieved. And the reduction is slightly lower, but that is not satisfying the rest of the negotiating party, especially countries considered or grouped in the small island developing state. They are sinking, they are submerged, and they want to have the increase only 1.5, not 2 degrees C. So this is the situation. The gap is still huge, and again, this system rank who is doing what, who is doing better job. And many of developed countries in the orange part of it, and then some still in a black situation, which is critically insufficient. Most of the countries are insufficient. No one is doing a good job in the green side. So this is the situation today. It was recorded last week, and still many countries are not doing well. The performance is not very good, and especially in the energy sector. So the demand of oil palm, trying to relate that with biodiesel and this kind of stuff, might be still there. But how to produce that sustainably? This is the premise that going to be discussed today. So looking at Europe, EU, which is not doing well, insufficient. Most of them are related to the policy measures, not the technology. The policy measures in terms of using a mix of energy sources. So it needs to be intervened, and that's again is political economy. So if you look at this graph, very messy, but the green one is the renewable. You can see renewable is still used by many countries, but growing. Sorry, the fossil is still used by many countries, but the renewable is growing, and this is in Europe. And the emission will still be high. In the next 10 years, it is expected to dominate about 11% of the total global emission. EU 27, it should be 28. And the majority of the emission coming from the energy sector. And that is related to the use of fossil as well. So last year, Europe emitting 2.73 billion ton. You remember that figure was 55 to be reduced half, 32, and Europe contribute 2.7, which is the best across the region. In 2010, it was double, almost 5-6 billion ton. Indonesia is producing 1.3, mainly due to the land use sector, not fossil sector. Again, here we can see the landscape of emitting greenhouse gas and the source of the emission itself. Now, the last point is about our group here, how science can help. Where do we stand? Are we debating and taking sides, or are we going to campaign to promote this or against that? I don't think science should do that. Science should produce numbers. Science should demonstrate evidence. And, institutions like university, with the collaboration across the globe, looking at the problem of the globe is very expected and very quite a model these days to work with many countries and see if science can do a better job to influence the community, the policy community. Back in 2015, when there was a big fire in Kalimantan, we did go out to measure what's going on and what happened in the smoke. And that number was quite heroic to produce. We got stuck in not in the mud, but in the smoke. When we did work in the field, we switched the equipment on in our hotel room, and the level of emission is very unhealthy. It was in a hotel room, and you can imagine if you go out, it's very toxic, it's very unhealthy. And on that very day, we measure the 2 weeks period, the emission of carbon dioxide and other gases equivalent to it was 11.3 teragram, 10 to the power to 12. And that is higher than the EU emission from fossil fuel during that 2 months of September, October. That's what is produced by smoke, by fire. Only 2 months fire, not only, but only short period compared with the entire year. This is quite staggering. So this number tells what should we do, what should be managed properly, and science can help. So this was happening in peatland, where smoldering fire occur when you drain and caught fire. So suddenly the quick fix would be how to make it wet, right? But in El Nino year, it's not easy to get water. So, the solution is going down and down. And it is very, very complicated, and most of them are related to the socioeconomic aspect. So I'm glad to hear that CRC efforts and work is not only working on the biophysical aspect, but also looking at the socioeconomic aspect, because this is most of the potential solution for the problem, if we know better about the socioeconomic setting of the community, of the country. This is the work of colleagues here, Stiger and Ed, many people in the room, I think, involved in this. Looking at the emission of nitrous oxide is another greenhouse gas which is important, especially in oil palm plantation, whether it's mineral or peatland soil. You can see here the white, black graph. Looking at the fluctuation, is suddenly showing very complicated factors influencing this emission. But in many cases, the use of fertilizer will enhance the emission. But according to colleagues here, you can intervene the management of oil palm when you introduce nitrous oxide, when you introduce fertilizer in order to reduce the emission of nitrous oxide. Complication with the undergrowth, with the distance of planting, with the management of soil biodiversity, etc. So this kind of number coming up more and more these days to help practitioner and policy community to decide what to do if you already have plantation out there, if you already have market, if you already have people depending on this particular ecosystem. We also did a lot of work in peat soil, looking at the emission. And you can see here, oil palm is relatively low, as long as you don't introduce a nitrous fertilizer, but as long as the water remains high. That's the revelation coming out from this research. And many crops still even higher compared to oil palm when you are not managing well. And this can tell us about the size of emission if you are talking about particular crops and the way the cropping should be intervened, or the management should be intervened. But talking with smallholder and with the industrial size of plantation is quite different. And this is the challenge. And I hope people will be working more and more on the difference between this setting, especially those who are working with local community with relatively low productivity in terms of CPO or bunch of oil palm. They really need a help in terms of improving the planting material, in terms of increasing the productivity. So instead of expanding the plantation, improving yield should be the direction for the future science can support. Now, do I still have time? Maybe the last two slides. Okay. Why oil palm is so popular, for better or worse? Why oil palm is so demanding? Why it is so controversial? I think you can shake your head and you might come up with different answer. Today the answer is this, tomorrow will be different, I don't know. But it is very, very dynamic, it is very challenging. The most hated plant, but the most expected plants also from different community, certainly needs a lot of thinking behind it in order to be able to save the world in terms of climate, biodiversity, and other issues, but more importantly is the livelihood of people who are depending on this. 17 million mostly are smallholder. 17 million are not industrial, although most of the production with the big industries. So again, this is very challenging question how to solve that kind of disparity. But looking at the same situation, but different product, different type of trading, but still Europe and Asia, I was intrigued by the fact about the trading of spices back in the 1600, 1700. From East Indies, or now Indonesia, to Europe, the situation was different. But I think we can learn a lot of documents, describing this thing nowadays, and we can open up again and what can we learn from this situation in this era. It was run by a private company. I cannot pronounce it well. Ed, maybe you can help. But VOC is very well known globally, especially in Indonesia. It's a big company. That's still in my head when I was a kid. VOC. And very wealthy, very big. And you can imagine what remains after this period by looking at the trading between in East India and Europe during these days. And mind you, it is very wealthy company. And recent document indicated that the wealth, the value of VOC was 7.9 trillion. How big is that? Money. But we can ask what the local get out of this wealth. Are we going to repeat this history again after 400 years? Smallholder, the peasant I mentioned earlier, are very, very poor. And around them are very wealthy oil palm companies. I think this reflects something, you know. But when you look at the numbers that VOC has, 7.9 trillion, that is the same as 20 modern companies combined. So this is very, very wealthy. Oil palm is just mine, it's very, very small. But the problem, the issue it causes, the debate, the campaign and everything is so big these days. So what is this? So what can we learn from this? This is our take-home message, perhaps. I have 6 items to offer here. I'm still thinking of, maybe a lot of people trying to do this, how to help local smallholder farmer. If they are absorbed in this system because their neighbor are doing the same, they cannot avoid this kind of thing and do it separately. But the productivity are very small. It is run very unsustainably. So improving their business and operation are very important. Indonesian government has enacted a moratorium for oil palm expansion back in 2016, especially in primary forests and peatland, in order to protect the high carbon storage as well as high diversity values. So talking about orangutan again, I think one has to think about how to conserve it ex situ. Now is the release of orangutan often found difficult. They have a lot of challenge because the habitat is no longer there. We can observe that. It's overcrowded. The expansion of palm oil palm is really affecting their habitat. So one has to start thinking about ex situ conservation. And when we are talking about tension, blocking products, campaign, those kind of things, these are not very healthy, to my opinion. So I think we need to have a balanced information about this, especially in the consumer side. Thank you very much.
Tricky issue, certainly. Yeah, we kind of certainly agree about that. But there also is options. And you may have, first of all, some questions, but also may come up with help in solutions. Who wants to start?
Hello, Daniel. Thank you for your very nice presentation. You are aware, like many of us here, that using peat soils is not really a good idea because, if you look at for example, the greenhouse gases coming from there, it's an order of magnitude higher than mineral soils. And so what is your perspective on that? Do you think there is really a future for land use on peat soils? Or do you think there are also places like, for example, peats that should completely be avoided or maybe even abandoned?
Answer directly? Yeah, well, it is very interesting topic and very interesting field to study. I've been spending most of my life looking at peatland and wetland in general, especially on the emission. And one of the staggering things here with regard to peat use was that the way of thinking, even during my schooling time, my time in the university, peat is considered as wasteland, meaning that you can, ignore it or you can use it whatever you want. And it was still taught until, 1990s, it is wasteland, including mangrove. Yes, tingle and a lot of mosquito, they are waste. So that kind of impression or understanding need to be changed. And thanks to the climate change debate, who's trying to understand and inform us, the community, more and more about the importance of this very fragile ecosystem. It's easily converted and easily changed with the consequences of emission. One thing to do about conversion is always, because it is wasted land, so you can give to anybody with very low price. If you're talking about industries, okay, I will cut down the trees and get the money out of it, and then it is waste, right? I can go. No. I think the answer here is how policy should be strengthened. Now, there are 2.2 million hectares of oil palm on peatland, which are illegal. And they are going to be revoked and put it back into forests. This is a very brave policy decision in the last few years. And people are furious about it. So you can imagine who is doing what, and government is getting improved in terms of understanding this, and they make very clear decision. So out of that 17 million, 2.2 are in the peatland and has to be returned into forests. According to the law that was enacted in 2016, it has to be back into forests. So there is a hope, there is a future, as long as the policy and the governance system is very strong. And I think science has the place to, influence and support this with numbers and evidence that we can produce. I hope that answers your questions. Not too technical.
More questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for the presentation. It was very insightful. I think the problem of decoupling the economic growth and the greenhouse gases emission is always the problem of the large developing countries, Indonesia included. And I think the UN, through the UNFCCC, is trying to offer a solution to this by trying to put a price on the standing trees, on the forest, in the form of the carbon credits. But my question is, do you think that, because there has been article from The Economist and also many economic articles about how big the potential of the market of the carbon credits and how big the contribution of this carbon credit to the GDP of the countries, my question is, would this be sufficient? Would this revenue of the carbon credits be sufficient for developing countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia, the biggest producer of palm oil, to turn away from the choice of converting the forest to the palm oil plantation? Or is this going to be another VOC scenario where only the big corporates are going to enjoy the wealth of the carbon credits purchase and sale, and the smallholders are going to still living in the subsistence? Thank you, that's my question.
Interesting questions. Yes, I think It's quite controversial about pricing per ton of carbon here. But one which is quite clear is that reducing emission or mitigating emission from land sector, forests, is very different with the effort implemented in a factory, okay? Because you have a clear boundary there in the factory, you have a very close system that you can control. That's why you can impose the rule and put the price on it. But putting a price in a very open asset like forests is very, very tricky. We've been working a lot in the past 10, 15 years on REDD, RED. People make a mocking there, RED is dead. It's still there, but it is very difficult. Like in the era of 1990s, 2000, with the CDM in forestry sector, because of the issue of boundary issues, leakage, permanence. Those kind of stuff is not faced by factory or something, or engine or machinery that emitting carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases. But in a landscape like forest, one has to be very creative in combining or bundling with other things, which can be more beneficial, both in monetary term as well as in social term. So in many places, people try to combine, reducing emission from a landscape like forests or converted forests with other benefits like socioeconomic benefit, biodiversity. Although this is simply not part of the climate change agenda. But countries and implementers should be very creative about it. So at the end of the day, the emission might be reduced, but not necessarily the main thing, not the main attraction for the community who get involved in that. Their benefit is day-to-day benefit. They don't see carbon in the market somewhere. And if one can introduce project or program which can bundle those kind of co-benefits, I believe this will be very prolific. Putting price of $5, $8 in forests, it means very little for people who do not have the asset there. They don't have ownership. They might be having ownership on carbon, but not the land, not the trees. So think about it. It's very complicated. I do not have one size for all kind of answer for that. It depends on the socioeconomic setting, especially if you are dealing with local community, adat, etc. It's beyond their thinking.
More questions?
So last week, is it working? I don't know. Last week we also learned that many of the smallholder farmers, they don't actually own the land that they're working on. So would that change something about this carbon credit system maybe if they actually own the land, and maybe would it also be possible to maybe attribute land that is not converted yet to communities so that they can profit together, like as a community, from protecting this land?
Yeah, land titling is very crucial. Big company can have the paperwork of land title of hundreds and thousands of hectares, but small community find it difficult to get that title. So that's the problem. So if the incentive of not cutting the trees or conserve the existing trees is related to the ownership or titling, I put it up here, security of the tenurial system. That might be better off for setting where people are, really on the ground there. Yes, they will be overridden by big company or big owner or big landholder, but they don't think about being big like that. They can manage their own thing. And in most cases, they survive better, including if there is any fluctuation of volatile in the market system. Smallholder usually survive better, as long as ownership is secure.
Daniel, thanks a lot. My question is about opportunities towards more sustainable oil palm plantations. In the CRC, there were 2 experiments, and you mentioned one of them, the oil palm management experiment, reducing the amount of fertilizer, and also the enrichment plantation. So they are scientifically very interesting, but they lack scale. So they are just experiments and not something that is applied on a larger scale. So I was wondering if you see any political opportunities, incentives to bring that to a scale that it actually matters at the end.
Yeah, scaling up is related to market, right? So if market is also protected or at least available for producer, there will be a better chance for them to survive with any other commodities. When we started the Storma, at the same time we also ran a project called ASB, Alternative to Slash and Burn. When we started in Jambi, Storma was in Sulawesi. We were trying to convince your group, why don't you come to Jambi? and you came 15 years later. Well, in the 90s, we found out that rubber tapper was very agile, was very, resilience, compared with the, in those days, the oil palm planters, because they do not need to worry about their product is getting rotten in the field. The fruits of oil palm can be rotten if you don't harvest when the price is very low. But you can stop tapping and your rubber, the latex still there. And that's why the resilience of rubber planters are much better in those days. I don't know what's the situation today. It might be different. And the market for latex is relatively stable than oil palm oil.
Any further questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Pak Daniel. I'm interested in the concept of oil palm agroforestry related to biodiversity enrichment or carbon sequestration. I'm just wondering if it would be a good solution to enrich biodiversity, but also keep the oil palm productive, and if the solution of oil palm agroforestry would be feasible, would it be easier to start implementing with smallholders, or would it be easier to implement it with corporations or factories? Thank you.
Yeah, smallholders these days are behaving like large-scale planters, but the size is smaller, meaning that the plantation is monospecies. They are also engaged with the mills that the large-scale plantation is operating. So you cannot differentiate now in the field whether they are practicing agroforestry smallholder or not. In most cases, they are also part of the big-scale operation because they cannot, process their own oil, right? They have to go to somebody who has the mill, and that's always owned by bigger companies. Yeah. It's different with latex, completely different.
Thank you very much, Professor Murdiyarso. My question is about the policy on the round table for sustainable palm oil. And I think it's a consortium of government and non-government, including large-scale oil palm plantations in Malaysia and Indonesia. And I had been looking, what are the criteria that they would certify that this is a sustainable palm oil production, aside from the benefits of the workers or whatever they do to the society. For example, are there field checks on, say, they're conserving carbon, they are mitigating excessive nitrogen fertilizers? I cannot find it in their website. What is really the actual criteria in that aspects of greenhouse gas emission that the company can be certified as sustainable production?
Yeah, I'm not expert in RSPO, ISPO, other roundtable, but the way they're operating it is like a standard things that they implement, and mainly they are satisfied by bigger operation. It's very difficult for smallholder to meet the requirement. So in the take-home message I put up here is, how can we help smallholder to meet these certification processes? Because most of this certification applied for large-scale companies, and small-scale one, very difficult to meet this standard and things. Yeah, there are a number of things that they look at, including social aspect as well, not necessarily biophysical.
Now, also, thank you very much from my side. I'm actually coming from the forestry, and I'm very impressed by the still existing vast natural forest of Indonesia. But so far, be it rubber, as has been published 2 weeks ago, but also oil palm were critically endangering the existing forest. And we have experiences in Jambi, but we also still in Indonesia has a wealth of beautiful near natural forest. And can we learn something which you can probably indicate to us? How can we avoid further forest loss by managing, be it oil palm or rubber plantations, or managing the forest or protecting the forest? Say, maybe in Papua, where still large tracts of forest exist, and also the Indonesian government would like to maintain a high forest cover.
Yeah. You're thinking of going to Papua, right? It's different situation there. I mean, if I can directly go to that comments, and the ownership of land in Papua is totally different with the rest of Indonesia, because the adat system is very strong. But some people manage to buy that kind of regulation. I mean, local adat regulation. I observe a number of concession company, logging company already there. And I have the nerve to predict that that is the entry point for oil palm, because many of those concession holders do not operate the logging properly. So it will soon be declared as degraded forest, abandoned, and subject to be sold in terms of concession to planters. So this is my worries. And small scale, but usually they are also having multiple kind of business model. It's not only logging, but also planting something, can be oil palm too. So why do we worry about expanding oil palm in Papua? I think everybody now is thinking that this is the last stronghold of, natural forests. Sumatra is gone, Kalimantan is gone, only Papua. Will it soon be gone? Unless this adat law is strengthened and protected and implemented, I have a doubt that protection of the last stronghold of tropical forests will be gone too. So I was talking with Stefan last night about, what can be done in Papua if we have more and more social science. That might be a good idea to look at this and find option, find alternative for, protecting as well as improving the livelihood of people there. If we do business the same as the island, I don't think it will, result in a sustainable management of tropical forests, sustainable management of industrial crop, industrial plantation, and this kind of stuff. This uniqueness of Papua should be considered and looked at very carefully. So that's my kind of response if you're thinking about what to do in Papua in terms of research.
More questions? Maybe a little bit from my side. This is basically the other side of the coin. We have seen that, Sumatra now is the lowland forest is really transformed almost entirely with some remnants left, let's say. You watched all the developments in the last 30 or even more years. What is your kind of perspective? How is this kind of going on now? Now in Sumatra, basically the transformation of rainforests is no longer a big issue. Maybe a bit in the swamps, but not on the kind of dry lands. So how can we envision kind of the future in Sumatra?
Highway is there in Sumatra now, stretching from the south to north, with the expectation that the economy will grow along the highway. But some people already observe that what is expected is not there. So I wonder if the expansion or extension of highway should be continued. The old road or highway was close to the mountainous area, what we call it Pitman zone. But now it's shifting to the lowland and even further down to the peatland, with, of course, very expensive construction of highway with that kind of situation. But the idea is quite clear. Maybe because of this wasteland is easily accessible, so they need roads to transport things and network with people. So worries about wetland and peatland is growing. Your questions. The highway will not be the answer for economic growth. That's my personal opinion and my worries.
Some more questions?
Do you think there's any way to combine the ecological interests to preserve the rainforest and the economical perspective?
If I catch your question correctly, there is a win-win solution or lose-lose solution. The win-win-win has never been tried. What is the third win here, you think? environment and economic. What is the third one? Next generation. Well, maybe you can satisfy the economic objective now, as I mentioned in the abstract, but not necessarily for the future generation, because the resources are not unlimited. It is very limited. Population growth, the demand of land, etc. So next generation might not get anything else left. So win-win-win is the real sustainability questions. So it has to be sustainable for generation to come as well.
Further questions, comments? Well, if not the case, then first of all, thanks, Daniel, for
Pleasure.
kind of enlighten us and this Indonesian perspective, which we certainly were very much interested in, and appreciate that you kind of took a bit the burden to give that and come here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Else, thanks everyone for being here with us, joining us, and yes, thanks for all the questions. Well, thank you once again.